A mission took Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi to a remote corner of the galaxy, where a dangerous assassin had sought refuge. The planet wasn't listed on official maps and was described by sensors as a living, pulsating mass covered in organic holes. The atmosphere was breathable but thick, as if the very air were in constant fermentation. The fugitive had fled into one of those immense orifices, and the Jedi pair decided to separate. Obi-Wan would fly over the exterior in the ship to prevent a possible escape, while Anakin would explore the dark, cavernous interior, guided only by his intuition and the Force. Each step Anakin took within that living structure deepened his connection to something inexplicable. The walls trembled like muscles, and the sound that echoed inside seemed to come from a cosmic throat. It didn't take long for him to find signs of the assassin: misshapen footprints, an acidic smell in the air, and finally, an abandoned ship stuck in a narrow, damp place, far too tight for any attempt at takeoff. There was no way for the enemy to escape by flying. The hunt had become an underground siege, with Anakin as the predator and the Force as his compass. The descent continued. With his lightsaber ignited, Anakin slid through spiral passages, where the bluish light was the only thing illuminating the pulsating walls. The presence he felt grew with every meter. It wasn't the assassin's presence, but something greater, ancient, embedded in that world, as if the planet breathed the Force in its rawest form. But the strange thing was that Anakin only felt it after descending far into the depths of those holes. When he thought about warning his master, a rock fell above his head. He dodged at the last second, and when he looked up, he saw the enemy, a four-armed creature, with nearly translucent skin and eyes adapted to the deep darkness. The creature believed it had the advantage of sight in the dark and only needed to knock the Jedi's saber away to erase his senses. The creature didn't hesitate. Shots were fired from each of its four hands, and Anakin deflected them with precision, using the Force to foresee the enemy's movements. Each shot was countered as the creature leapt between walls and climbed ledges, but Anakin kept up the pace. One of the shots was returned with force and hit the alien square in the abdomen, causing it to fall. But before Anakin could approach, the fugitive said, even with great effort, "Goodbye, Jedi scum," and then activated a belt with bombs that exploded in seconds. The impact was devastating. The ground collapsed. Stones fell on Anakin, and darkness swallowed him. Obi-Wan, far away, felt the explosion and called out for the Padawan. But there was no response on the communicator. They were too far apart. When Anakin regained consciousness, his mechanical arm was crushed under debris, but the rest of his body had escaped unharmed. The tunnel behind him had collapsed, completely isolating him. Only his saber still functioned, illuminating those destroyed walls. The first thing he noticed as he stood up was the intense return of that presence, closer and stronger than ever. Anakin didn't hesitate. Even wounded and disoriented, he began walking toward that Force that seemed to call to him. It was as if the explosion had revealed a hidden path in that place. After walking for several minutes, he found an opening and, inside it, a lake. The water was translucent and emitted a subtle, slightly purple glow. It was as if every ripple carried a vibration of the Force itself. Anakin stopped at the edge and felt something in his mind detach. A hypnotic sensation enveloped him. The lake was calling him. It was as if all the questions he had never known how to ask found their echo in those waters. He knelt and extended his hand over the surface, feeling an unusual warmth coming from the water. But he didn't pull back. He felt that it was calling to him with all its might. Time seemed to slow down. His mind was submerged even before his body. Every part of him wanted to dive. As his fingers touched the surface, the water vibrated as if it recognized him. Anakin slowly entered those unknown waters, and the lake gradually absorbed his body, wrapping him in a cocoon of sensations. Visions began to invade his mind with brutality. Disconnected images, moments from his childhood, the present, and futures that might never come to pass. It was as if the water was reading his soul. But Anakin didn't resist. He fully submerged himself. The dive wasn't just physical. It was like falling inside himself. Lights of the past passed before his eyes, but something in the water distorted time. He saw himself as a child again, running through the streets of Tatooine, feeling the twin suns burn his skin. He saw his mother smiling, alive, waving at him. He saw Padme, still a teenager, looking at him with tenderness. But soon the images began to transform into painful visions. The lost hand, the shame of defeat against Dooku, the repressed rage, the massacre of the desert people. The memories became more intense, faster, as if the lake was pushing him forward. Geonosis appeared before his eyes. He wielded the lightsaber against Count Dooku, driven by anger and pride. He saw the exact moment when he failed, when his hand was severed. He felt the pain again, not just physical, but spiritual. He saw Obi-Wan fallen beside him. He saw Yoda's gaze as he interrupted the fight. It was all too real. The water around him seemed to tighten around his body as if judging him for every action. The sequence led him to an even greater nightmare. The Jedi Council, the temple in flames, children begging for their lives, and he, merciless, wielding the saber. He saw Padme crying, then falling to the ground, lifeless. He saw himself dueling Obi-Wan at the edge of the lava, shouting words of hatred while feeling his body consumed by fire. It was a parade of horrors that tore at his soul. And then, a new figure emerged in the center of those murky waters, imposing and inevitable. Darth Vader. The black figure stood there, motionless, as if waiting for him. Unlike the other visions, it didn't dissolve or fade. On the contrary, it seemed to react to Anakin's presence. The two faced each other. At the bottom of the lake, something else awaited him. The dark presence he had sensed from the beginning was now before him, in solid form. The silhouette of a tall man, cloaked in shadows, with a burned black helmet that exuded fear, manipulated by a horrid being who resembled the Chancellor. Anakin knew who it was, even though he had never seen him before. Darth Vader, the reflection of everything he could become. When he tried to retreat, he realized he couldn't. The figure watched him as if it recognized him too, and then it began walking toward him. It was like a living nightmare. Anakin wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He tried to activate the saber, but his arms didn't obey. He tried to run, but couldn't move. The terror was absolute. The figure approached slowly, as if savoring the moment. And then, just as Vader's metallic hand was about to touch him, everything went black. Reality emerged from within the water. It was a very close call. Obi-Wan was pulling Anakin out of the lake, gasping and soaked. "You stayed too long," said the Master. Anakin looked at the water and realized the presence had vanished. But something was glowing at the shallow edge of the shore. The lightsaber still illuminated a partially submerged object. Anakin approached and retrieved it. It was the helmet from his vision. The same one. Burned. Imposing. Terrifying. Obi-Wan came closer and asked what it was. Anakin, still trembling, lied with a steady voice. "What's left of the assassin? The mission is complete, Master." But as he stored the helmet against his body, he knew that object was not just a trophy. It was an invitation, and he had already begun to accept it. Anakin returned from the mission with his body intact, but his mind deeply shaken. At night, sleep became an arena of torment. Visions of war, flames, and screams echoed through his dreams like omens of an inescapable truth. The helmet he brought from the planet wouldn't leave his thoughts. It was always there, like a silent presence in the corner of the room. Padme watched him from a distance, seeing her husband increasingly absorbed in contemplation of that dark object. He said it was merely a remnant of the defeated enemy, but he never had the courage to wear it. Anakin never wore that mask. Obi-Wan, for his part, noticed the Padawan's growing distance. The once impulsive and determined gaze now fluctuated between anger and apathy. In Jedi Council sessions, Anakin barely responded to questions and showed discomfort at any criticism. Until, in one of those meetings, after being questioned about his distraction, he stood abruptly and coldly snapped back, accusing the masters of distrusting him without reason. The atmosphere grew heavy. Yoda remained silent, and Mace Windu looked at him sternly. The hurt was evident. Anakin felt excluded, a stranger among his own brothers of the Order. But nothing disturbed him more than what he had seen in the visions, and yet he couldn't bring himself to tell anyone. The image of the Chancellor as an instigator of tragedies repeated itself, as if the lake had revealed something his heart had always feared. Even so, he lacked the courage to face him. He avoided any meeting with Palpatine, but not out of respect. It was fear. Fear of confirming what he already knew, or worse, of being seduced by the words of the most influential politician in the galaxy. And every time he thought of reporting him to Obi-Wan, just being near the helmet was enough for his desire for justice to turn into a thirst for power. One silent night, Anakin stood before the mirror. His eyes were tired, but a flame burned within. In his arms, the black helmet reflected his image in a distorted way. He lifted it cautiously, and for an instant, brought it close to his face. Something in his mind told him that all it would take was putting it on for everything to change. It would be a new beginning, or the definitive end of everything he had been. His fingers closed around the metal structure. But before he could make a decision, the door opened hastily. It was Padme. She wore a hesitant expression, but soon smiled warmly upon seeing her husband. She said she had something important to tell him. Anakin put the helmet down on the table and turned to her. The words came out with force. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, reality was silenced by joy. He hugged her tightly, as if trying to anchor himself to that hope. The promise of a child, of a new life, seemed to push the darkness away. But the relief didn't last. That happiness was too fragile to withstand what consumed him inside. Even beside the woman he loved, Anakin couldn't free himself from the dark fascination of Vader's face. In the early hours, while Padme slept beside him, he would sit at the edge of the bed and stare at the object, as if waiting for it to speak. In his mind, voices appeared, mixed with memories of the lake. Voices that incited him, that showed him grand futures, filled with power, where he would never again be hurt or controlled by anyone. It was the empire of will, the absolute dominion, and it seduced him. He tried to remember the moments with Padme, the laughter in Naboo, the stolen kisses, the promises made under the moonlight. He tried to feel the strength of the love that had united them, of the child now growing in her womb. But the presence of that so-called precious object was like a slow poison, seeping into his mind. Anakin no longer knew whether he was fighting something external or himself. The future called to him with promises of glory, while the present held him in a knot of affection and duty. He felt torn, split between two destinies. The doubt became unbearable. In his mind, a recurring question began to arise. What if that helmet wasn't just a remnant of the future, but a choice? What if everything was laid before him for him to decide? With each passing day, the object seemed more alive. Its darkened surface reflected expressions that weren't his. His eyes, when seeing themselves in it, no longer recognized the idealistic Jedi of the past. They saw something darker, something inevitable. Padme, though not fully understanding, began to notice the distance. Anakin smiled less, spoke less. When she touched his hand, he sometimes recoiled as if being pulled from a trance. She tried to talk to him, but he would deflect, change the subject. Only when he slept did she see him cry. A silent tear ran down his face as he whispered, "My precious." The man she loved was heading toward a place she couldn't follow. The crack in his destiny was already open. The helmet, now stored in a secret compartment, seemed to pulse. At times, Anakin swore he could hear a breath coming from inside it. Heavy, metallic, constant. Anakin's absence during a mission under his responsibility was felt as a clear sign that something was wrong. Not even Obi-Wan knew where he had gone, and Padme, worried, looked for him everywhere she could. When she arrived at her companion's quarters, she noticed the absence of something crucial: the helmet. It made her freeze inside. She understood, even if she didn't say it out loud, that that object was tied to something dark. But Anakin was already gone. He had left everything behind, guided by an impulse he no longer knew was rage, necessity, or destiny. Padme reported everything to Obi-Wan, and they began thinking about how to find him. Anakin walked hastily through the Senate halls, ignoring the looks of guards and advisors and carrying something hidden in a cloth. The door to the Chancellor's office opened with a dry snap, and he entered unannounced. Palpatine was alone, and before he could say a word, the Jedi threw the helmet onto the desk with brutality. The object spun through the air and landed with a hollow thud. "What is this?" the Chancellor asked, standing up slowly. His eyes analyzed the mask with unusual focus. There was something there that he recognized, even if he didn't fully understand it. Silence overtook the room for several seconds. Palpatine touched the helmet with the tip of his fingers and felt a subtle yet intense energy. The object seemed to exude echoes of suffering and power. "This design, it's Sith," he murmured almost in a whisper. Then he turned to Anakin, his voice low and inquisitive. "Where did you find this?" Anakin was visibly nervous and unstable, and without hiding any details, he told everything. He spoke of the distant planet, the lake, the visions, and the terror he had felt facing the figure of Vader. Palpatine listened without interrupting. At the end of the account, the Chancellor walked over to the helmet and lifted it with care. His eyes narrowed. He seemed to reflect deeply and thought this could be the perfect opportunity to try something more drastic with Skywalker. Then he turned to Anakin and said, "The only way to understand what you saw is to go all the way. If you want to know the truth, you must wear this mask." Anakin hesitated, but something throbbed in his mind. Could this really be the path to understanding what was inside him? Palpatine saw the doubt and pressed further. "You must face what you truly are." But Anakin was no longer the same. His eyes shone with a mix of fury and clarity. He raised his voice and declared, "I know who you are. The visions from the lake showed me that too. You are a Sith, a traitor. I saw what you turned me into with your lies, but I also saw that it was me who destroyed you, Chancellor. And I confess I'm tempted to do that right now," said Anakin in a threatening tone. Palpatine's face showed no surprise. On the contrary, he seemed to have expected that moment. "Then why did you come to me? Why did you bring this here?" he replied, still calm. Anakin didn't answer. There was a storm inside him. The helmet weighed in his hands like a symbol that united everything he feared and everything he desired. Palpatine, sensing that his direct influence had lost strength, changed tactics. With a softer voice, he tried to plant a seed of doubt. "What if what you saw was not a vision of the future, but an illusion created by the Jedi themselves? They keep you under control. They mold you to serve the interests of the Order. What if they want to make sure you never reach your true potential?" Anakin trembled. The words were not a command. They were an invitation to chaos. And worse, they made sense to the part of him that wanted to believe them. The room seemed to close in around Anakin. Everything spun. The helmet in his hands, the Chancellor's gaze, the words corroding his mind like a slow poison. He stayed silent for long seconds. He was about to give in when a sound broke the trance. The office door opened. A staff member entered, carrying documents, and stepped back upon sensing the tension in the air. It was enough. Anakin closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and left in a hurry, carrying the helmet in his arms like someone bearing a corpse. The Chancellor smiled, imagining that he would soon put on the mask and return to follow his commands. Upon leaving that suffocating environment, Anakin felt the weight of the choices not made. He was lost between two worlds. He no longer belonged to the Council, nor did he fully trust the Jedi, and now he doubted himself as well. He felt only the urge to place the object on his head and let himself be consumed by madness. He walked through the shadows of the city without knowing where to go, carrying not just the object, but the image of what he might become. The mask was now not just a relic, it was a mirror. Anakin didn't return home, and when he went to the temple, he simply took one of the ships and left without saying a word. Anakin did not return after the events that drove him away from the Jedi Council. His prolonged absence worried the Masters, and it was Obi-Wan who took the initiative to seek answers. He sought out Master Yoda in the temple quarters, and together they reviewed the mission records and the use of Jedi ships. That's how they discovered that Anakin had departed alone, once again, toward the dark, perforated planet where it all began. The place had no official name, but it was already marked in the memory of both masters as a point of imbalance. Without hesitation, they decided to go there together. When they landed on the planet's surface, the holes pulsed again, as if the world were alive and aware of Anakin's return. They didn't take long to find him. He was at the center of a clearing, the same one he had found at the beginning of the saga, but now partially collapsed from the explosion of the bombs. Obi-Wan knew he would be near the same lake where he had once submerged. The two masters descended together and slowly. Obi-Wan helped Yoda down, and Master Yoda used the Force to remove large rocks from the path. The two continued on until they reached their goal. Sitting, with red eyes from crying and exhaustion, Anakin held the helmet with a possessive grip. His fingers trembled, and his eyes flickered between guilt and obsession. As they approached, Obi-Wan called his name calmly. "Anakin, we're here to help." But Anakin didn't respond right away. When he lifted his face, his features were disfigured by sleepless nights. "You don't understand. This helmet, it speaks to me." Master Yoda stepped forward, cane in hand. "Let go, you must. Corrupted, it already is." But Anakin backed away, clutching the object to his chest. His eyes turned fierce. "No one will take it from me," he shouted, as if defending part of himself. The Master's response was a tense silence. When Obi-Wan took another step and reached out his hand, Anakin sprang up and drew his lightsaber. The blue blade lit up the unhinged face of the former Padawan and the walls of the cave. "I said no one will touch it." The tone of his voice was desperate, almost childlike. Yoda realized how deeply that dark presence had infected the young man. It was something similar to what he had once felt in the depths of Dagobah. But here, the energy was raw, impure, uncontrolled. Yoda was the first to act. He used the Force to hurl the helmet far away, making it crash against one of the natural walls of the large cavern. Anakin screamed in rage and charged at the two masters. The fight began. The first move came from Anakin, who attempted a direct strike against Obi-Wan, shouting, "You always wanted to control me." Obi-Wan blocked firmly, deflecting the blade. Then Yoda leapt and tried to disarm him with an aerial spin, but Anakin stepped back and countered with a Force push. In the second move, Skywalker slid along the ground and cut through an unstable pillar to bring down rocks on the Masters and distract them. Yelling, "Fight it!" Obi-Wan dodged and intercepted Anakin with his saber. In the third move, Yoda used the Force to stabilize the cave walls once again. But Anakin sliced through everything with a swift saber spin and shouted, "You don't understand what I saw." The fourth move was decisive. Obi-Wan appeared behind Anakin and tried to restrain him from behind, but Anakin elbowed free and swung the saber back with brutality, similar to what Darth Maul had done to Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan pulled back just in time. "You're better than this," the Master shouted, trying to reach the real Anakin behind that shadow. The fifth move came from Yoda, who used the Force to deflect the blows and grab Anakin's right hand. Imbalance this artifact caused. Correct it, we must. In the sixth and final movement, Obi-Wan and Yoda acted in sync. Yoda created a distraction with shards from the very ground, while Obi-Wan disarmed Anakin with a precise strike that cut through the hilt of Anakin's lightsaber, and Obi-Wan caught it in midair. Without the saber, Anakin thrashed, shouting, trying to run toward the helmet. "Give it back! It's mine!" He fell to his knees, writhing as if the object were part of him. Yoda then used the Force to pull the helmet into his hands. Master Yoda felt the weight of the dark energy in the object. It was an ancient relic, full of darkness. Without hesitation, he used the Force to crush it. Yoda's power was so great that the massive helmet was compressed to the size of a marble. The pieces shattered, but the Master didn't stop. He gathered two large rocks from the area and crushed them around the fragments, smashing them until even he could no longer feel a trace of the dark side. The silence that followed was deep. Anakin, still on the ground, cried quietly, as if a piece of his soul had been ripped out by force. Yoda looked at Obi-Wan and spoke in a grave tone. Ancient, this artifact was evil. Destroyed, it needed to be. Anakin was taken back to the Jedi Temple under watch. There, before the council, he reported everything he had seen. The lake, the visions, the encounter with the Chancellor, and the whispers from the helmet. He explained how it had weakened him, how the fear of losing control had pushed him to the edge of the abyss. The council listened attentively, and for the first time, Anakin spoke without hiding anything. That silent night, the Chancellor's tower was overtaken by the thunder of sabers and firm commands. Palpatine, realizing the approach of the Jedi Masters, rose from the throne with a twisted smile and unleashed a storm of Force lightning, knocking down soldiers and drawing screams. But Yoda absorbed the impact and redirected it with his own hands, while Ki-Adi-Mundi and the other Masters advanced in unison. Mace Windu took the lead, dodging the bolts with precision and, with a brutal strike, shattered the floor beneath the Sith's feet, forcing him to his knees. Palpatine tried to rise but was immobilized by the Force. In one final desperate attack, Windu spun his saber and, with a clean cut, severed both of the Chancellor's hands, sending him falling, screaming, and spewing insults. Without mercy, the Masters gagged him with a containment device and dragged him like a dog defeated by his own venom. His eyes burned with hatred, but it was too late. The empire he had dreamed of would never be born. For the first time, the Republic saw him for what he truly was, a disarmed and defeated tyrant. With the Chancellor imprisoned and powerless, the Separatists lost their source of influence and command. The war machine that had threatened the galaxy began to collapse, and the planets once gripped by fear began to rise again. The Republic, though wounded, found new breath. Anakin, still in the process of healing, was finally able to return to Padmé's side. The reunion was silent and full of tears, not of sorrow, but of relief. She embraced him like someone reclaiming something lost forever, and he cried in her arms, like a man who had survived his own abyss. Her presence, the warmth of home, the simplicity of daily gestures, all reminded him of what truly mattered. And when he touched Padmé's belly and felt the twins moving, Anakin realized he had something even more valuable to protect: the future. Far from the Senate halls and the tensions of the council, a new life blossomed. Padmé chose to live in a small refuge in the fields of Naboo, where the winds danced among the hills and the waters were as clear as hope. There, Anakin rebuilt his connection with the Force in a more peaceful way. He taught the children, told stories of ancient times, and little by little stopped being a tormented hero and became simply a devoted father. It was a simple life, but a full one. The children, Luke and Leia, grew up surrounded by love and truth. Padmé tended to flowers and books, while Anakin worked with his hands, sculpting, building, teaching. There were no more shadows, only memories, and those he made sure to share so that his children would understand the dangers of fear and ambition. His mistakes became lessons, and his wounds roots of wisdom. Padmé smiled as she watched the three of them together, running through the meadows as if the galaxy had never bled.